How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei, Daf 80 of Masechta Kiddushin. In Masechta Kiddushin there are 82 pages. So we're getting pretty close if you ask me. Alright, so we're talking more about like a Sor Yuchsin kind of stuff. I wouldn't say it's so Yevamasi. So, maybe a little bit. No, but whatever. No, it's nothing insane. And then we get to an interesting sugya, the sugya of Yichud, which is interesting, of boys and girls being secluded together, alone together. Okay, so let's go weiter. Okay, we are on, our journey begins on Daf Ayin Tesamud Beis at the Mishnah, about 15 lines from the bottom of the page. So a fellow goes with his wife traveling someplace, and they come back. They come back to town after their travels, and he's there with his wife, and now they have some kids. And he says, I present you my wife. This is the wife I left with. I've come back with the same person. These are her children. I guess while they were away, they had some children. So he doesn't have to prove anything. Doesn't have to bring any proofs. Because we already know, right? This is the woman who he was married to before he left. And when he got married, we already made sure that everybody was allowed to marry each other. And the kids, we're going to explain to the Gemara why, but the kids, we're going to assume, are her kids. So if she's ksheris, so the kids are ksheris. Mesav elu baneo. Now if he says, look, the wife that I left with is in Wellwood, but these are the children that I had with her, well then, meviraya labanim venu meviraya laisha. So he has to bring proof that these are in fact her children. Now once he proves that these are in fact her children, he doesn't need to prove that she is miyuchas, that she is from kosher lineage, because we already proved it when they got married initially, right? Fine. Now, but if he comes back and says, look, I married a woman when I was away, and these are her children, well then, so then he proves that this woman who he's now married to is kshera. Now once he proves that she's kshera and the kids are her kids, so then he doesn't need to bring any proof about the kids. Again, the Gemara is going to explain why not. Mesa ve'elu banel, if she says that I married somebody, she's dead, and these are her children, well then tzarich lavi raya ala isha v'ala he would have to bring a proof, A, that the wife was from kosher lineage, and B, that these are in fact her children. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. 1 second. Now says the Gemara. Amir Rabba bar Rafuna. Says Rabba bar Rafuna. V'chulan bechruchim achreya. There you go. If you're wondering why we don't need to bring any proof about the kids when she's there, because we're talking about where the kids are like attached to her, right? They're young, they're attached to her, so it's clear, we can assume that these are her kids. So then, as long as we know that she is kshera, so then we can assume that the kids are kosher as well. What's going on next door? I think my next door neighbor found a project to work on. Right, while I'm recording Babylon Talmud. My neighbor's a very funny person. She gets very makpid when people make noise, ever, but also between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, that's like siesta. But she's not always so quiet herself. Amar Rabbanan, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis said, Ishan asasim din asayom. Okay, so if a fellow comes and he says, look, I married a fella while I was away in some place, meviraya laisha, so he brings a proof that she is in fact ksher. Vein tzarich laviraya alabanim, and he doesn't need to bring any proof about the kids. Umeviraya lagidolim, vein tzarich laviraya laktanim. So now we're saying that as long as the kids are minors and they're connected to her, they're always with her, so then that, right, so as long as you prove that she's ksher, then you can assume that those are her kids, and if she's ksher, then the kids are ksherim. But the older kids who are not attached to her, right, and they're kind of more independent, so then we would have to bring a proof that they are her kids, right, so that she's kshera and that they are also ksherim. When do we say this? That the little ones you don't need to bring a proof for. Be'isha achas, only if he says that I married one woman when I was away, and this is her. Aval b'shtei noshim. But if he says, look, I got married, but then my first wife died. Then I married her. Then I married the second wife who you see here, and these are her kids. Well then, maybe raya la'isha v'alabonim alagdolim v'alaktanim. Well then, you have to bring a proof, A, that this wife that you have is kshera, and B, that these are her children, because it could be that maybe they are the children of the first wife, and just that they were always, they're very comfortable with this new wife. So in that case, you'd have to bring proof, both that the wife is kshera and that these children are her children. Rish Lakish says, Rish Lakish, Lo shanu ela b'kod shegvul. Chaver, I'm going to roll up my sleeves even a little, one more roll, 1 second. Okay, I've rolled one more roll. Let's see how that rolls. Alright. So Lo shanu ela b'kod shegvul b'yuchsin lo. So Rish Lakish says that when we can trust that the kids belong to the mother, that's with regard to eating truma. With Gartin Truma, if this fellow is a kohen, so we can assume, well, if she's a kshera, and these kids are, young, and they're with her, so then we can assume that they are ksherim as well, and they can eat truma. If he's a kohen, the kids can eat truma. But if there was a daughter, she would not be able, based on this assumption, she would not be able to marry a kohen. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says nish. Rabbi Yochanan argues and says even by yuchsin. We can assume that these kids are ksherin, and if there's a daughter, she could even marry a kohen. These sleeves are bothering me. Rabbi Yochanan is consistent with his reasoning. Malkin al achzokis, that we give malchus for the chazakis, that if we have a chazaka, if we have an assumption about something, right, if we can assume something in a certain way, so we can even give lashes based on that chazaka. Soklin v'sarfin ala chazakis. If we have a chazaka, we could stone, we could burn. Vein sarfin truma ala chazakis, but we don't burn truma based on a chazaka. Now, what are we talking about? Malkan ala chazakis. Rav Yehuda. When we say that we can give lashes based on a chazaka, it's like Rav Yehuda, the Amr Rav Yehuda. That if a woman has a chazaka that she's a nida, that her neighbors saw that she was wearing her nida clothing, so we can assume that she's a nida, and therefore if her husband sleeps with her, we would whip him. Mishum nida. Fine. Soklin v'sarfin ala chazakis, we stone people, burn people based on chazakis. That if you have a father, a mother, children, sounds like a nice family, they were all living together. So nobody was at the chasna, but they moved to town, right? This nice new family moved to town, a father, a mother, a son, a daughter. And now, and they've been living together, so we assume, okay, that they're a family, right? We didn't look into, nobody's at the wedding, whatever, they moved to town, but okay, we can assume that they're living together as one family. Well, Niskal and Zelzeh, if the son sleeps with the mother, well then that would be a chiyuv skila. And if the father sleeps with the daughter, that would be a chiyuv sreifa. So the fact that they live together is enough to make a chazaka that we would stone and burn. Amr Shimon ben Pazi, Amr Shua ben Levi, Mishum bar kapore, maise. So Shimon ben Pazi says the name of Mishum ben Levi from bar kapore that there was a maise, be isha shebos li Yerushalayim, with a woman who came to Yerushalayim, betinok murkov lo al kseifa, and she had a baby, right? A woman moved to Yerushalayim, she had a baby with her, vigdilaso, and she raised the baby, uva. But then the baby, when he was no longer a baby, he was old enough, he had beer with her, and they brought them in front of Bezdin, and then they stoned them. Not because we know that 1,000% he was the son, but simply because when they moved to town, this son was a baby and was sort of attached to the mother, and we just, based on the fact that we assume that they are mother-son, so we can stone them based on that chazaka. Ve'ein sorfin trume ala chazakas, and we do not burn trume based on a chazaka. The Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, Reb Shimon ben Lakish sorfin ala chazakas. Reb Yochanan Omer ein sorfin. That Reb Shimon, that Rish Lakish says that we would burn truma based on a chazaka, whereas the Reb Yochanan says that we would not burn truma based on a chazaka. They're consistent with their reasoning. It's not. We learn in the Mishnah, Tinok shenimtza b'tzado isa uvatzik biyado. So you have dough, and there's the baby right next to the dough, and the baby has some dough in his hand. So friends, what do you think happened? Connect the dots. What do you think happened? The baby stuck his hand into the dough and pulled out a piece of dough. So that means, Mamela, that the baby touched the dough. The question is the dough tahor, or is the dough now tummy? Reb Meir mitayr v'chacham mitam. So Reb Meir says that the dough remains tahor, whereas the chacham say that no, the dough is tameh, mipnei shedarko shel tinok litapeach, because the chacham say that the dough is tameh because babies play around in the garbage, and there's nevelas and shrotzim and who knows what over there. So therefore, we assume that the baby is tameh because he touched nevelas and stuff in the garbage, and then he touched the dough, so the dough is now tameh as well. V'avinam, we ask, my time to Meir, how come Meir says that the dough is tahor? Because ksaver rov tinokis mitaprin. Well, look. He agrees that yes, most babies play around in the garbage, and we have to assume that they're tummy. But there are some babies who don't play around in the garbage, and they would be tahor. Now the dough, was tahor, so it has a chazaka of being tahor. So in that case, so you have a chazaka of the dough being tahor. We also have the fact that there are some babies who don't play around in the garbage. So if we combine those two, the fact that we have a chazaka that the dough is tahor, and there are babies who don't play around in the garbage, versus Israelei Ruba, that kind of weakens the majority, which is that majority of babies play around in the garbages. Let's go weiter for a second. But the rabbi say mi'uta command delay say dummy that the fact that some babies do not play in the garbage is irrelevant because it's a mute. Ruba v'chazaka, ruba adif, which means that all you have is a rov and a chazaka, and the rov is greater. Okay, so let's now that we've read Reb Meir's opinion and the Chacham's opinion, let's explain them, because I did that a little bit quickly. It's not complicated, but let's just explain them. So basically, according to so there's basically two factors here. Factor number one is that the dough was tahor, so it has a chazaka of being tahor. Now, there are two groups of babies. The majority of babies play around in the garbage and are tummy. Some babies, however, are tahor, they don't play in the garbage. Now, according to Meir, the fact that some babies are tahor is relevant. According to the Chachamim, the fact that some babies are tahor is irrelevant because it's batul b'rov, right? Therefore, it's batul, it's non-existent. So therefore, going back to Meir, so according to Meir, you have three categories, right? You have the majority of the babies who are tameh. You also have a chazaka that the dough is tahor, but the minority of the babies who are also tahor kind of tilt the scales in favor of the dough being tahor, because the dough has a chazaka of being tahor. You also could add to that the fact that there are some babies that are tahor, so therefore that kind of tips the scales in favor of the dough being tahor, even though a majority of babies are tummy. Now, according to the Chachamim, however, the fact that some babies are tahor is irrelevant because most babies are tummy, and that's what's important, and it cancels out the fact that some babies are tahor. So now what you're left with, according to the Chachamim, is that a majority of babies are tummy, so that's a rov. Now there's a chazaka that the dough is tahor, but the ruba, the rov, is stronger than the chazaka, right? Which is that we said, right? Ruba adif, right? Ruba v'chazaka, ruba adif, according to the Chachamim, if you have the rov of babies being tameh, and you have the dough which is a chazaka of being tahor, the majority is going to win out, and therefore they say that the dough is tummy. Now, Amr Rish Lakish says Rish Lakish Mishum Oshaya Zohi Shesorfin Olea Esachuma, and says Rish Lakish that you will burn, right? Because the Chacham say that the majority, right, that we assume that it's tummy, we will burn this dough, right? That if this dough is truma, we'll burn it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Ein Zo Chazaka Shesorfin Olea Truma, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that even according to the Chachamim, who say that even though the Chachamim say that we go based on the rov, and that we would assume that it is tamei, we would not burn the dough based on that. We would just sort of be uncertain about it, but we wouldn't burn it. Ela ezo chazaka Rabbi Yochanan shesorfen alez truma. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, what is a chazaka that you would burn truma for? Kiditanan, although apparently it should be kiditanan, like we learned in a brayso. Isa b'soch habayis, if you have a dough inside of a house, ushrotzim utzvardim metaplin tram, and you have shrotzim and frogs, I don't know, they're like missing limb, I don't know, there's like limbs of shrotzim and tzvardim. So apparently a sheretz is kind of like a frog. Was it like a toad or something? I don't know, the article just says sheretz. I don't know, but it's some kind of frog-like, not frog thing. So, okay, so there's a dough in the house, and there's frogs which are tahor, but also these shrotzim that are tameh. Metabin, they're like a bunch of limbs of like toads and frogs. And they're like pieces of these limbs in the dough. That's gross. Imrov shrotzim tmeya, imrov tzvardim torah. So if the majority in the house are these shrotzim, so then so again, so one second. Yeah. Wait 1 second. Yeah. Okay. But it says Hashem Rov Shrotzim im Habayis Muchzekes Leo Shrotzim Mitzuyim Sham Yosem Mitzvadim Tomei Afli Soyev De Chazaka Viruba De Isa Kaman Hu Aval Hay De Tinok Ruba De Lesa Kaman Hu. So in that case, right, so if most of these, I don't know, frog shrotzim things are, if most of them are shrotzim, so then we would assume that it's tamei to the extent that you would burn the dough based on it, because most of the things in there are shrotzim, and also it's like actually a visible, majority over there. We actually have this pile in front of us, as opposed to the baby that it's a theory. I don't know, some babies, right, most babies go to the garbage, some don't. So in that case, it's less tangible. So we would not burn truma based on it. But in this case, Rabbi Yochanan would say that we would actually burn the truma. Tanya Kavasit Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa supporting Rabbi Yochanan that that by the baby we wouldn't actually burn the truma. We'd just be tola. We'd be uncertain about it. It would be besuffic. Tanya Kavasit Rabbi Yochanan Shnei Dvarim Ein Beim Das Lishav Asom Chacham. Okay, there are two things that don't have, you can't actually ask them anything, they don't have knowledge to ask, but the Chacham made it as though they do have das lishal. Meaning, right, generally, right, we say that sofek tumah b'shus hayachid is tummy. However, that's only if it's a situation of davar sheyesh bo das lishal, that you can ask to clarify, right, that you can ask, is it tummy or not? But if it's something that you cannot ask and inquire about, so then even b'shus hayachid sfeika would be tahor. So there are two examples of something that she'ein bo das lishal, but we treat it as if yesh bo das lishal. Tinok v'od acheres, and that is a baby. And another example, tino kadamar, and in the case of the baby is that which we talked about with the dough. V'od acheres, and the other mahi, what's the other example? Isa b'soch habayis, if we have a dough in the house, v'tanu golim mashkim umashkim tmeim sham. So there's a dough in the house, there are also chickens in the house, and there's also tamei mashke in the house. V'nimtzu nikurim be'isa, and there are holes in the dough as though the chicken pecked at the dough. So so we have to be concerned that the chickens may have first pecked the tamei mashkin and then pecked the dough, and therefore it's tamei. Fine. So we say Tolin lo ochlim lo sarfim. We don't eat it, but we also don't burn it. So, and there you have it. So we said that there are these two examples, and we gave one example being the chickens, and we said by the chickens we're tolin, so memele by the baby also would be tole, we would not actually burn it. Rav Shua ben Levi says, Rav Shua ben Levi lo shanu elo b'mashkim levanim. Now this concern is only by clear liquids, about b'mashkim adumim, but if they're red liquids, im isa dinokir made the yadir. If they're red liquids, well, if the chicken actually did peck the dough, well then you would be able to see it. You would be able to see the red. V'duma b'lasinu isa. But wait, but maybe how do you know? Maybe the dough absorbed the red one. So Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan davar zeh shama bribi. So Rabbi Yochanan says, look, Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Rashi points out, bribi means like the gadol ador. Uferusha lo shama. So he heard this halacha, but he didn't hear the explanation for it. Lo shanu el b'mashkim tzlulim. That we say that we have to assume that the dough is tamei if the mashke was clear, whether it was actually clear or whether it was kind of a clear red, right? Meaning it could be like a light version of red. Babua shel tinok nikrba, as long as the reflection of a baby could be seen on it, then it's considered clear enough that it would be absorbed. Of a mashkim achurim lo, but if they were a darker red, so then if the chicken pecked the red liquid, then you would be able to see it on the dough. Okay, and now we get up to the sugya of yichud. Says the Mishnah, Lo yisachid odom im shtei noshim, aval isha achas misyachedes im shnei anoshim. That is the basic premise of yichud, that a fellow cannot be alone with two fellas, but one fella can be alone with two fellows. Right? The assumption is, so let's read it again. So lo yisachid odom im shtei noshim, that one fellow cannot be alone with two fellas, because as we're going to see in the Gemara, the assumption is that he would be able to convince both of them to do an avera with him. Whereas aval isha achas misyachedes shnei anoshim, but one fella can be alone with two fellows, because it's assumed that the fellows would be unwilling to do this avera in front of each other. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon af ish echad misyached im shtei noshim bizman sheishto imo. So Reb Shimon says, look, a fellow can be alone with two fellas as long as his wife is also there, right? Because she's going to make sure that they're going to make sure in that context that no avera happens. V'yashin imoim befundiki, they can even sleep together in a kretschmer mipnei sheishto mishamarto, because again, if the wife is there, she's going to make sure that nothing inappropriate goes on with any of these women and her husband. Misachid Adam im imo v'im bito, a fellow can be alone with his mother, with his daughter. V'yoshen imoim b'kerev basar, they can even sleep together in the same bed. My understanding is that kerev basar means naked. V'im igdilu, but once they get older, zo yeshene b'chsusa v'zeh yoshen b'chsusa. Then once already, if the child gets older, Rashi says that by a daughter, when she's a ketana, even when she's a ketana, they should probably sleep. If I understand, it means the clothes on, clothes off. They should sleep with the clothes on. But the son, he could sleep with the clothes off as long as he's he's a minor. But once everybody gets older, if they're going to sleep in the same bed, they should wear clothes. So the Gemara asks, how come we say that one fellow should not be alone with two fellas? Tana Develio, Hovanoshim Dait and Kalos Alein, because the assumption was that the girls would be easy to, that the fellow would be able to convince the fellas to do an avera with him. How do I know that? Where do we have a pasuk to say that a fellow cannot? This concept of yichud, that a fellow and a fellow should not be alone together. So Amar B'Yechanan says B'Yechanan Shimon that in the name, so B'Yechanan says in the name of Reb Yishmael. Remez liyichud min ater minayin. Where do we have an allusion to yichud in the Torah? Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki yisischa achicha ben imecha, that if your brother, the son of your mother, tries to convince you to do to worship the Geshkes, V'chi ben ein meses, ben av eino meses. I don't understand. Only the son of your mother would convince you, but not the son of your father. Elalom marloch. No, what it's teaching is ben misyachadim imo. The chiddush is that ben imecho, that a son is allowed to be alone with his mother. That would not be a violation of yichud. Ve'asu l'syachadim kol arayos shebatorah. However, all of the other arayos in the Torah, you would not be allowed to be alone with. Pashti dekav maiksiv. Okay, fine. That was a nice drasha. That was a nice drash. Ben imecho yichud. What's the simple explanation of the pasuk? Abai says, Abai lo miboya kamer. It's saying not only this, but even that. Lo miboya ben av. Right? Obviously, your brother from the same father, disanile, that you hate each other because because you're competing for the inheritance. Va'ayitz le'etzis ros, and your brother from your father will give you bad advice to worship Getchkis. Afilu ben aim, but even your brother from the same mother, Dilo sanile, that you don't hate each other because you have different fathers and you're inheriting from different places, so you're not competing. I might think, okay, I should listen to my brother. He's got nothing against me. He has no interest in harming me. No, be wary of your brother from the same mother as well, because you got to stay away from the Getchkis. Okay, fine. Name a mastis in the cloak kabo shol. So let's say that our Mishnah that says that a fellow cannot be alone with two fellas is not like Abba Shol. The Tanya is within the Brisa called Shloshim Yom Yotzi B'Cheik, that if a baby dies within the first 30 days of its life, it's considered a nefel, you can do sort of a toned down funeral. And you don't necessarily need a coffin. You just kind of carry out the baby, and just carry the baby. V'nikbar b'ishachas v'shnei nashim. You don't need to make a whole big funeral. Rather, even one woman and two men. Aval lo b'ishachas v'shnei nashim, but not with one fellow and two fellas, because that could be yichud. Abba Shol Omer af b'ishech v'shtei noshim. Whereas Abba Shol says, no, you can even bury this baby with one fellow and two fellas. So we see that apparently, according to Abba Shol, one fellow with two fellas is not a violation of yichud. Afilu tema Abba Shol. To which the Gemara says, no, you can say that our Mishnah is also like Abba Shol, that Abba Shol would agree that under normal circumstances, a fellow should not be alone with two fellas. But b'shas aninus tover yitzrei. But during a time of aninus, right, that they're going out to bury a newborn baby, that is not a time when he's going to be thinking about how he could convince these two fellas to do an avei with him. Therefore, Abba Shol says, look, in the context of burying a little baby, a fellow can go to bury this baby with two fellas. But I could argue that in general, he would say a fellow should not be alone with two fellas. Now the rabbis who say that a fellow should not bury this baby with two fellas, he holds like Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak, Ma'is onen odom chai gever al chatov. Afilu b'shas aninuso, even when a person is an onen, nonetheless, b'shas aninuso shel odom yitzro misgaber olav, still he has a yetzer hara, and therefore even when he's an onen, a fellow should not go out with two fellas. But Abba Shol says, no, the pasuk is talking about something else. Ki ksiv, that pasuk is talking about Hu b'misrayim amidosov ksiv. It's a person who's complaining to the Eibishter about his lot in life. And this is what the pasuk is saying. Ma'israyim amidosov. What's this fellow who's complaining to God, getting so worked up about? V'chi gever al chatov. What? As he always controlled his sinning instincts, that he deserves life. Dayu chaim shenasati lo. You should just be happy that he's alive. It's not like he's perfect. It's not like he's always managed to keep his yetzer hara in check. V'rabanan, and whereas now the where am I? So Abba Shol. Okay, so the rabbis had said that the pasuk is saying, look, even an onen needs to be concerned about yichud. Abba Shol had said, no, an onen doesn't need to be concerned about yichud. But the Rabbanan say, but even so, even if you say that you don't need to be concerned about yichud and about your yetzer hara when you're an onen, but nonetheless, Rabbanan kiahu But still, you're playing with fire, shtickle, right? Abba Shaul, if you say that a fellow can go out with two fellas in the context of onim because, he's broken, he's not going to be thinking about doing an avera, but you're kind of opening up kind of a slippery slope, because you might have bad actors who actually are not burying a baby, but they will put on an act, right? They'll go out with a baby, two fellows, they'll go out, outside of the city as though they're going to bury a baby, but they're not actually going to bury a baby, they're just going to do an aver. So even though a fellow, when he's actually an onain, you could argue that he doesn't have a yetzer hara, but people might exploit that situation to kind of fake it so that they can go do an aver someplace. So even so, it should not be done. Friends, that was the pay of Masechta Kiddushin. Okay, the first part of the daf, we're talking about kind of these different scenarios where we are about a chazaka. How much can you rely upon a chazaka? Then we got to this interesting sugya of yichud, the concept of a fellow and a fellow should not be alone together, an unmarried fellow and unmarried fellow, and we talked about in what cases, right? What are the kind of criteria? So I guess a fellow and a fellow should not be alone together, but one fellow and two fellows also should not be alone together, but one fellow and two fellows would be acceptable. That was Daf Pei of Masechta Kiddushin. Peace out.